Have you ever wondered what happens when entertainment stops being entertainment and starts shaping the way we see power itself? Strange, isn't it? No one's really talking about this, but they should. Because when Hollywood and politics cross paths, it's never just a love story, it's a merger of image, influence, and invisible deals. Tonight, we look at one of those mergers. It began with laughter. On the set of Curb Your Enthusiasm, a show built on improvisation and self-awareness. It ended, or maybe began anew, with a wedding, a famous name, and a question too uncomfortable for Hollywood to ask. When you marry into a dynasty, do you become part of its legacy or its brand campaign? Cheryl Hines was never meant to be a political figure. She was the funny one, the comic relief, the actress who could turn awkward silence into gold. But somewhere between comedy takes and press appearances, her personal story slipped quietly into a much bigger narrative, the American myth of the Kennedys. And that myth has rules. It's not about individuals. It's about icons, about preserving a name that has come to mean hope, tragedy, and unfinished promises. Once you step into that world, you don't just play your part. You inherit expectations, loyalties, and a family that's half history, half headline. Now, you might say, so what? People fall in love. Of course they do. But love in the spotlight doesn't exist in a vacuum. It becomes content. It becomes a statement. And when that spotlight burns as bright as Hollywood's, the people holding the camera are rarely neutral. Hollywood has always loved the Kennedys. They're photogenic, tragic, marketable, Camelot on repeat, the perfect mix of glamour and gravitas. So when a Hollywood insider becomes part of that legend, the story practically writes itself. Except, who's writing it? Think about it. A comic actress from Florida becomes the spouse of a man challenging America's political establishment. That's not coincidence. That's narrative. Symmetry. The industry that sells illusions suddenly finds itself connected to a movement that questions them. How convenient. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In today's America, fame is the real currency. The Kennedy name still carries weight, yes, but celebrity can amplify it tenfold. When you combine a political legacy with Hollywood storytelling, you don't just get coverage, you get control over perception. And perception is power. No one wants to admit this, but the line between sincerity and strategy in public life has all but vanished. When a politician speaks, we ask who wrote the speech. When an actor posts online, we wonder who approved the caption. It's not paranoia, it's production. Everything is a show now. Watch closely at how interviews are framed. The lighting, the set, the tone of laughter. It's all deliberate. A message wrapped in charm. And that's what makes it dangerous, because when propaganda looks like entertainment, it slips past your defenses. You don't even know you're watching a performance. That's what's happening here. The marriage of Hollywood and politics has always existed. From Reagan to Schwarzenegger, from campaign fundraisers to award ceremonies. But this time, the script feels different. It's quieter, more calculated, less about ideology, more about image alignment. Ask yourself, what does Hollywood gain from this? Access, credibility, another bridge to power. And what does the Kennedy legacy gain? Relevance, in an age where legacy alone no longer guarantees influence. When Tucker Carlson asks questions like this, he isn't asking about gossip. He's asking about structure, the invisible architecture of modern persuasion. Because the real issue isn't whether Cheryl Hines loves her husband. It's how that love is packaged, publicized, and politicized. Look at the media coverage. Soft lighting, nostalgic tones. It's all designed to humanize a narrative that might otherwise feel outdated. A dynasty trying to remain modern, relatable, camera-ready, and Hollywood, ever hungry for a comeback story, plays along. But here's where it gets unsettling. For decades, Americans have trusted television personalities more than politicians. They feel familiar, authentic, like friends. So when a Hollywood insider merges with a political dynasty, that emotional credibility transfers. It's brand osmosis. You stop thinking of them as a candidate or a spouse. You see them as people you already like, people you've laughed with, cried with, binge-watched for years. That's not just storytelling. That's psychological leverage. And the Kennedys know storytelling. They've been mastering it since the first televised debates. They understood the camera before most politicians knew what lighting was. They built a myth on tragedy, resilience, and charm, and Hollywood turned it into legend. Now, that legend gets a reboot. Same last name, new cast. It's how dynasties survive, by reinventing themselves for each generation's medium. In the 1960s, it was print. In the 1980s, it was television. In the 2020s, it's social media clips, late-night monologues, and viral interviews. And so we circle back to the big question: who benefits? When a famous actress marries into power, does she lend credibility to the cause? Or does she become another character in the show? Because make no mistake, there is a show. There are producers, directors, scripts, talking points, all dressed up as authenticity. And somewhere behind it all, real decisions are being made by people you'll never see on screen. That's the genius and the tragedy of modern media. We think we're consuming information, but in reality, information is consuming us. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we watch a smiling couple on television, are we witnessing love or marketing? When we hear sincerity in an interview, are we listening to truth or a perfectly rehearsed monologue? No one's saying it's fake, but maybe, just maybe, it's managed. Because if you control emotion, you control loyalty. And if you control loyalty, you control the crowd. That's the quiet lesson in every modern love story between fame and power. So where does all this leave us? It leaves us in the strange in-between. Halfway between truth and theater, sincerity and strategy. Because when celebrity enters politics, the rules don't just bend. They vanish. Hollywood sells dreams. Politics sells direction. Put the two together, and you get belief. The most expensive product ever made. Belief moves people. It shapes votes, markets, wars, and yet belief can be manufactured, rehearsed, marketed like any streaming show. That's the world we live in now. The borders between acting and advocacy, between entertainment and manipulation, have all but dissolved. The public doesn't notice, because it isn't meant to. Every interview, every soft-focus profile, every late-night anecdote, it's part of a new kind of campaign. The emotional one. When Cheryl Hines smiles on camera, most people see an actress being herself. But somewhere, someone sees data. Engagement metrics, demographic resonance, focus grouped appeal. And when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. steps onto a stage, people see heritage, courage, independence. But producers and consultants see brand alignment. What used to be politics is now performance. What used to be conversation is now content. It makes you wonder, does authenticity even exist anymore? Or have we convinced ourselves that sincerity is whatever sells best that week? The irony is almost poetic. The Kennedys were once symbols of idealism, a family that seemed larger than ambition, grounded in service. Hollywood was the land of illusion, where fantasy ruled. Now, the roles have flipped. Politics performs, Hollywood moralizes. The illusionists preach, and the idealists perform. And it's not just them, it's the entire system. Turn on any news network, any podcast, any influencer feed. You'll find the same choreography. Outrage here, redemption there. Tears at the right moment, jokes at the perfect beat. Nothing is spontaneous. Not anymore. Why? Because unpredictability doesn't test. Well, because control wins elections. Because the audience, that's you, rewards what feels familiar. Maybe that's the saddest part. We demand authenticity, but punish imperfection. We claim to want honesty, yet only applaud the version of it that fits neatly inside our screens. So when a Hollywood actress steps into the orbit of a dynasty, it's not a coincidence. It's a sign of the times, a convergence of two industries that no longer pretend to be separate. They both need each other. Politics needs emotional reach. Hollywood needs moral relevance. Together, they create the illusion of unity, a story everyone can project themselves into. But illusion has a cost. Ask anyone who's been in that spotlight long enough. The performance never ends. Your beliefs, your privacy, your silence, they all become props. The camera doesn't care if you're tired. The narrative doesn't care if you disagree. The only thing that matters is continuity. Because once a legend starts, it must be maintained. That's the law of modern mythology. And the Kennedys, more than anyone, understand that law. The public wants Camelot again. Not necessarily the truth, but the feeling of it. Hollywood knows how to deliver that feeling better than anyone. So here we are. Another cycle, another chapter, another pair of faces meant to remind us that the dream isn't dead. It's just recast. But behind the curtain, the machinery whirs, media strategists frame the headlines, consultants polish the sound bites. 1,000 unseen editors choose which clip you'll see, which pause you'll remember, which tear will trend on TikTok. And you, the viewer, will scroll past it thinking, that felt real. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Either way, it worked. That's the quiet genius of modern persuasion. You don't have to believe everything, just enough to keep watching. Yet there's a consequence. When everything becomes performance, truth becomes almost impossible to recognize. You start doubting sincerity even when it's there. You start assuming every word is a script, every gesture a stunt. Eventually, cynicism replaces curiosity. And that's how power wins. Not by convincing you of a lie, but by exhausting your capacity to tell the difference. Think about that the next time you see a celebrity speak truth to power. Ask yourself, which power are they speaking for? Because no one stands on that stage alone. Someone built it. Someone paid for the lighting. Someone approved the message. Hollywood tells us stories so we can escape reality. Politics tells us stories so we'll accept it. But when the storytellers and the statesmen become one and the same, who keeps the truth alive? It's tempting to shrug it off, to say, that's just how things work now. But apathy is the soil where manipulation grows. Once you stop asking questions, you start accepting scripts written by others. That's why, on this program, we keep asking, not because we have all the answers, but because someone has to keep the questions alive. So let's ask one more. When Cheryl Hines appears beside a legacy name on national television, are we witnessing a personal story or a continuation of America's longest-running franchise, the Kennedy myth? You can decide for yourself, but look closely. Listen to the tone, the music, the framing. Every cut, every quote, every smile is saying something beyond words. And maybe, just maybe, that's the whole point. Maybe the future of politics isn't about persuasion at all. It's about production. The best produced story wins. No votes, no debates, just vibes, virality, and vision boards. A nation of viewers applauding the most convincing performance of patriotism money can buy. It makes you wonder, when truth finally appears on stage, will we even recognize it? Or will we change the channel, thinking it's just another episode of the same old show? Strange, isn't it? The republic that once worshipped truth now worships visibility. And visibility belongs to those who own the camera. So as the credits roll on this latest union of Hollywood and power, remember, it's not about one actress or one family. It's about a system that turns citizens into spectators, questions into content, and love into marketing. The next time you hear the music swell, the applause rise, the commentators say, "Isn't that inspiring?" Pause. Look beyond the frame. Ask yourself who wrote the script, because if you don't, someone else already has. And the story they're telling isn't about freedom. It's about control. Served with a smile, wrapped in sincerity, and sold under the name of entertainment. That's the cost of the spotlight. That's the real show. And now, you know.